Moriden Athluan.
Working from within, Moriden Stormcrown created distrust, hatred, and discord within the ranks of the mighty vampire army raised by the ancient bloodline of Clan Volkar.
Cursing the name of he who defeated them, these vampire hordes were driven back to the plains of oblivion.
And so we find ourselves thrown together once again, my friend. Almost as if one of us were looking for the other. But why would either of us do that?
To self-improvement and the training of long-ignored talents and abilities.
Even as he trained at the illustrious and fabled Mages' College of Winterhold, Moriden still continued to search for a solution to the continuing dragon attacks.
Spending his time, now, searching for answers among the countless tomes of the Arcanum Library, it would not be long before he was again called on to save all of Skyrim. Nay, all of
Is
the
that where we left
the
off?
grasping hands of power-mad maidens.
Once again, the bards only tell you what they believe to be truth. They weren't there. They don't understand. You, though. You, of all people, need to understand. So let me tell you what the bards will not, what they cannot. Because the truth is not what the bards would have you believe. Prologue. My days as a vampire were over. Though it took some small amount of work on my part, as well as that of the Dawn Guard, the stories that I had planted among the populace were taking root, the fiction that I had planned the entire sequence of events to destroy the vampires from the inside. We both know the truth, though. Had I not been betrayed by those who were closest to me, I might yet still be one of their number. Only two people had never turned their backs on me: Lydia and Lady Serana. The first had been a corpse for near 2 months. The second would never leave her own vampiric curse behind, and would continue to lead a far more circumspect Clan Volkar. I had given up my own curse. I could feel the hole in my soul, something that needed filling, a place that hadn't been full since the day I killed Ulfric Stormcloak. Filling it with a purpose of some kind would help, I thought. I just needed the right purpose, the right thing to dedicate myself to. And I certainly did not lack for choices. Alduin and the dragon threat, the cultist attacks out of Solstheim, the direct attention of multiple daedric lords. The problem was that I knew next to nothing about any of them. This is when a trite old saying returned to mind. Knowledge is power. If I was to fight any of them, I had to know them as I had come to know and understand Lord Harkin. I lacked knowledge of these other threats, and if I was to steer my own life, I needed to gain that knowledge. The truth of what happened when I went looking for it, though, even I have trouble understanding all that happened. It is no wonder that the bards have rewritten the tale to be a cautionary one about what happens to those who seek too much power. But the truth is not what the bards would have you believe. One Evening Star, 4th Era, 201. The deed was done. My vampiric blood had been purged. I had no ties to Clan Volkihar, apart from a friendship of sorts with Serana, nor did I care about the Dawn Guard. Once the stories of my inside work among the clans became known, the Dawn Guard would not challenge me either, especially since they couldn't prove that the stories were entirely fiction. That still, however, left me with a need to keep myself busy, to make myself useful. I had thought about this when I was traveling to Morthal and through the long hours up until that new dawn. I had several things that called out to me, but all of them seemed more than I wanted to deal with immediately. I needed a few days at least to heal my mind, to cope with the hole that now existed where my vampire personality had once been. Which left me with the museum and Aryan, or more to the point, the new guild house he wanted built, and the new guild he wanted me to lead. The physical labor, as mindless as it was something I could lose myself in deliberately, turn my mind off, so to speak. Though much of it had already been completed in my absence, I could lend my physical labor to the last few touches before I found a new way forward. Thus, when I woke from one of the deepest sleeps I have ever enjoyed, I bolted down to breakfast that has never tasted so fine, and then went to the ground floors to lend myself to the efforts. There honestly wasn't much left for me to assist with. Over the last weeks, since Aryan had mentioned the idea and I had agreed to it, he had been hiring and spending to get the project done. Really, my efforts amounted to helping to hang the last few doors, furnish a room or two, and hang one final banner on the outside walls. Small things, but enough so that I could, at least for a small while, ignore the need to hide from the sun. I'd only been a vampire for about a month, but that habit had become a part of me. The need to seek the shadows out and hide in them. It would be a while before the rays of the sun became something to truly enjoy again, instead of fear. With the guild house now complete, it was time to speak with Aryan once again and put plans into action. If this guild were going to exist, there was work that would need to be put in. And if that work kept me busy, so much the better. After retrieving Aryan from the library, because where else would he be, we both took a more complete tour of the new home of the Skyrim Explorers Guild. The plans were solid and seemed to cover all of the needs we would have, a place to house and supply the group of explorers we hoped would flock to the new guild's banner. Do not let the name fool you. This guild would not be a bunch of map makers, nor were we looking to explore and fill in the map of Skyrim or any other province. These had largely been done before, by those somewhat more qualified to do so. Instead, our purpose would be to explore the places that none else dared to. Sites, caves, and what have you that had defied exploration in the past, due to the dangers involved, the work required, or any other reasons sufficient to stop their exploration. In other words, the kinds of things I had been overcoming for months now on my own. Even with my success, however, there were places, such as Windcaller's Pass, where I had a brief encounter with would-be thieves a few weeks ago, that even I had not been fully able to explore. Such places would be the target for the guild. With combined effort, these additional problems could be overcome. Once we found members, of course. Arjen gave me a list of people who had inquired about becoming a part of the museum over the last couple of months as a starting place. That, however, was not the only new thing on my list of tasks. Arjen had also been contacted by a friend in Elsewhere. A staff had been located there that his friend believes would be of interest to the museum, but due to recent troubles there, he isn't able to send it along personally. Indeed, we'd have to go there to get it. Even with the war over there, the borders of Skyrim are still closed, for all intents and purposes, which leaves only a single way to get to the Khajiit home province. The moon paths. I don't even pretend to understand how they work, but I am assured that they can bypass such menial things as a border with no problems, assuming I can convince a Khajiit caravan to take me with them. While there are several caravans in Skyrim, none of them, to our knowledge, make use of the moon paths to return to their home. There is, however, supposed to be one organizing near Falkreath. It isn't something I'd had in mind when I woke this morning, but once I have found the prospective members of this new guild, perhaps that is what I should pursue, while they get to Solitude and get themselves organized. If nothing else, the trouble in Elsewhere should afford me some small entertainment, I suppose. The Thalmor are always fun to shoot at, after all. With a list of potential recruits in hand, a caravan to talk to, and a few small other tasks I had agreed to in what felt like a previous lifetime, I left Solitude just after midday to begin crossing things off the lists. The first thing, the closest thing, was the investigation of a small cave near Solitude, Wolf Skull Cave. It was on top of a ridge not far from Solitude, and I had bypassed it many times on my journeys between the city and Castle Volkihar. Steward Firebeard is sure that the stories are nothing, bandits at most, but to keep some of the locals calmer, he had agreed to send someone to investigate the site. I was that someone, and I had left it for far too long, truth be told. I had no concerns about the cave when I left Solitude. After I'd killed a necromancer just outside its entrance, however, I began to have far more concern. I learned some things that I hadn't expected in the next half an hour. I also confirmed some things that I'd already known, but was certainly glad to know were still true. First, despite being outcasts and hated by most everyone in the so-called civilized world, necromancers tend to group up for mutual protection, meaning where there is one, there will usually be several. In those first several rooms I found no less than 4 more necromancers, all of whom are now food for the worms. Second, I am still every bit as good a shot with my bow as I was with my vampiric strengths. Losing my curse has not deprived me of any of my more mundane skills that I did not use as much during the last month. Finally, and this one was a surprise, though my curse is now gone, not all of the changes that it made to me have gone with it. The ability to sense life, to see the energy of the living around me, has not left me. I wasn't even thinking about it when I used it. I'd grown so used to it that using it was second nature to me. This means that I am even more dangerous now than I was before I was a vampire, and this pleases me greatly. I'll need such advantages as I go into dark places such as this cave, seeking treasures to fill my pockets and necromancers to kill. This is not a group of bandits. This is not even a group of minor idiots who think that summoning the dead makes them powerful somehow. No, this is something far, far more dangerous. And it is lucky for all that I finally came to this cave rather than waiting even longer. This group, they have crossed the boundary from stupidity to insanity. It took me a few moments to understand what I was seeing, what I was hearing. Their chanting and their summoning made no sense to me at first, though the names tickled the back of my head. Potema, Wolf Queen, and then it all clicked into place. These idiots were trying to raise one of the most deadly, most insane monarchs of the Empire's past. Though she was never Empress, the War of the Red Diamond all but destroyed the legitimate portions of the Septim line, and led to the eventual crowning of Pelagius III, the Mad Emperor. And they were trying to summon her back to Skyrim, something I could not allow. The chanting grew louder and more insistent as I closed in on the necromancers. The blue flows of energy that were being sucked in towards the top of the central tower in this buried city became stronger and more blinding. When the voice of Potema herself echoed through the cave, I felt my hair stand on end. And when the necromancers began to try binding her to their own will, I could feel the battle of wills between them and Potema. A group of powerful mages to attempt to try this. But Potema, the Wolf Queen, was not just some queen of Skyrim who had tried for the throne of an empire. She was considered, by those who have far more knowledge of her than I claim to be one of the most powerful necromancers to have ever lived. If I didn't disrupt this summoning, the province might be plunged into warfare again, and 2 wars had already been fought in recent months. It did not need a third that might lead to another attempt for an empire's throne. I am unsure if I was just in time, or just a moment too late. That the summoning was interrupted I take as a given. When I put an arrow into the spokesman of the group, the lead caster to which all the others were supplying their powers and energy, she went to the ground like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The glowing form and energy that had been gathering, however, did not simply vanish, but instead flew out of the ceiling and into the late afternoon air. I can only foresee 2 possibilities. Either there was not enough of Potema there to hold the gathered energy together, and it will therefore disperse back into the world, or the soul of Potema has returned to the face of Mundus. If the former, then good riddance. If the latter, then I fear we will see things soon that point to her return. Either way, though, this cave is now cleared of those who had been using it, and I will need to tell Firebeard about it as soon as I can. Everything else can, for the moment, wait. He must be made aware of the possible calamity I may have unwittingly unleashed. Though the hour was beginning to be late when I arrived at the Blue Palace, Firebeard was still perceptive enough after a day of court politics to see my face and know that I had dire news from him. He excused himself from Queen Elisef's side, and we both went to the bottom of the stairs, out of sight and hearing. I relayed what I knew. His face went white at the mention of Potema, and even more so when he heard how it had all been resolved. He agrees with my assessment. If the Wolf Queen is somehow still around, it will not be long before we feel the effects of her presence. Even more shaking to him is how close he came to dismissing the entire episode. If he hadn't sent me, if I had not actually gone, the results would have been horrific, no matter who won the contest of wills I interrupted. He assured me he would keep his ear to the ground over the next while, and if something came of the episode, he would contact me as soon as he could. I retired to the museum's safe house for the evening, planning on departing from Markarth in the morning, where I could find 2 of the potential guild recruits. 2 Evening Star, 4th Era, 201. The beginnings of the day were simple and easy enough. It was only after I passed Broken Tower Redoubt, depopulating it of Forsworn once again, that things began to seem wrong somehow. Indeed, as I reached the crossroads of the path leading towards either Markarth or Carthwayston, I paused and sat for 10 minutes at least. My plans would have me go towards Markarth, but something else seemed to pull me towards the other path. I tried to figure out why, and my mind kept going back to a traveller on the road between Granite Hill and Rorikstead, the follower of Peryite. So it was that I followed the road through Carthwayston and up the mountainside beyond, eventually cresting the hill and finding a lone Khajiit in a camp set up next to a statue of the daedric Prince of Pestilence. Many think of him as the source of plagues and sickness, but from what that one traveller told me, it seems to me more like he works to contain them. Either way, I was here, and through Azura's gift I could feel his presence, and it felt like he was waiting for me. Kesh the Clean, the Khajiit, also seemed to be waiting for me. Upon seeing me, he suddenly went from caring only about the preparation of his meal to throwing a number of odd items into the barrel before the statue, including shavings of a silver bar, a ruby, some deathbell petals, and some vampiric ashes. Not exactly standard alchemical ingredients, but having mixed them with whatever had already been in the barrel, some kind of reaction occurred, and the vapors that rolled from it instantly entered my nose and put me into a half-stupor. As I stared up at the face of the dragon-ish statue, I heard the voice of Peryite, and it led with the one set of words that promised I would be paying close attention. "I have been watching you closely, you know," the Lord told me, "and I think you are the mortal instrument I require." It took a few minutes in my clouded mind state, but I finally understood his task. Some time ago, he sent a blessing, what we would call a plague, among the Breton villages in High Rock, and then sent an elf called Orkendor to gather them together. He is both cause and container of many plagues, it seems, creating them so that those afflicted can turn to his worship, ensuring his own continued power. That elf, however, has somehow betrayed Peryite, and I am being sent to kill the elf. I'm not sure if it is the vapors I breathe or something else, but I found myself agreeing to go to Bethardom's, a Dwemer ruin where the afflicted have gathered, and kill Orkendor. It did not take long to arrive at Bethardom's. It took even less time to encounter the afflicted. Being Breton, I should have expected more in the way of magic use than I did, and thus was caught unprepared for the first assault by their eagle-eyed sentries. On the one hand, I approve of anyone who does their job as well as these did. On the other, did it have to be this group? Today? Well, perhaps being my first major fight, no, the necromancers didn't count. Since my rebirth as a regular Dunmer, I was just being overcautious, but having just regained my mortality, I did not wish to give it up so quickly. As alert as they were, however, they were not able to stop me. I'm not sure how many followers Lord Peryite will have once I am done, if they insist on throwing themselves in front of me like this. If, however, I must kill them all to get at Orkendor, then so be it. I seem to have a contract with the daedric Lord, with his life as the price. I would not disappoint. The afflicted seemed to be in a state of confusion. Their overheard conversations, prayers, and hushed whispers all seem to indicate that they still follow Peryite, still look on him as their lord and master, yet he does not appear to them now. They pray for enlightenment, to know what it is they have done to offend him. They ask for a sign. And I fear that I am the sign he has seen fit to send. He may have blessed them with the plague that has drawn them all together, but he has also now cursed them with a new plague that will leave nothing behind but their cooling bodies. Me. I almost pity them. On the other hand, what can one expect of a deal with a daedric lord? I ask this with the full knowledge that I, too, have made a deal with one. The difference being that I fully expect that the deal will somehow go sour. Even if they have not so far, that is no promise that it will not. As they should have been. I will remain alert and cautious. These afflicted of Periites are certainly no masters of tactics. They have a significant presence here. Makes sense when one considers how many Breton villages Periite must have blessed, and how many of the survivors Orkendor brought here. But they are all clearly farmers and ranchers, not a soldier among them, and it shows in how they fight. Forming a long line and charging towards a bowman in ambush position, for example, is not generally conducive to long life. If these applied even the most basic of tactics, I might be hard-pressed to deal with them. Just as fortunate for me that they are not, then. 3 Evening Star, 4th Era, 201. Habits can be hard to break, and sleep, like many things, is a question of habit. Having spent a month as a creature that doesn't need sleep, it is so easy to forget that I need it once again. Thus it was that the midnight hour came and went before I truly realized it was even a concern. The fatigue I began to feel was not slowing me down, not yet, anyhow, but when I noticed it showing up, it was a stark reminder. Not that I could stop and sleep now if I wanted to. Prudence demands that I continue, as to stop would be to invite attack from these mostly ineffective farmers. Though large rooms opened up one after another, I pushed forward, hoping to find Orkendor and put an end to this deal between myself and the Lord of Pestilence. At last, as I imagined the sun was cresting the horizon outside these ruins once again, I found the Mer pacing before a pillar carved with likenesses of Periite. Clearly he was worried, though about what I cannot say with any certainty. He had to know his flock, those he had gathered together here, were dying. He had to know that his lord wanted him dead, though why I was sent, instead of simply withdrawing the protections from disease Periite offers, I cannot begin to fathom. All I can say with certainty is that Orkendor was right to worry. Orkendor, you had to know you were leaving the path. Your lord had given you power, a favored position, and the kind of trust that few are given. Even so, you gave it all up for... what? Do you really even know? What did you plan to happen? What did you think you could accomplish leading these followers of Periite astray? As your lord will not tell me, and you no longer can, I will never know. In the end, though, it doesn't matter. There is only one price for betrayal. Orkendor, shepherd of the afflicted, chosen of Periite, is dead. A key-locked door just beyond Orkendor's final resting place led to a Dwemer lift, which in turn led back to the surface. A short ride back to Periite Shrine, and I spoke once more with the Lord of Pestilence. I find myself ambivalent about him after our interactions. Though one might think a being dedicated to the spread of diseases and whatnot would be inherently evil, I am not sure that such is really the case. Disease is both released and contained under his stewardship, hardly the mark of true evil. Indeed, it seems he uses it more to ensure that he has followers than anything else. and the reward I received for taking his contract, well... Spellbreaker is one of the greatest shields ever to grace the face of Mundus, capable of repelling even some of the strongest magic ever cast. Perhaps even strong enough to repel dragonfire or other breath weapons. So while I still do not relish the idea that the lords are paying attention to me closely, it seems... Well, I cannot deny that the power that this one, at least, offered may well be worth that price. My first recruitment target is one Kaya Oldenson, a miner working for the Left-Hand Mine just outside of Markarth. Before I could locate him, however, I overheard the report of a group of miners from a more outlying section, Kolskegger. I've passed the place before. It lies at a small crossroads not far from the city, but hadn't really noticed much of anything about it other than a small forsworn scout party on occasion. I likely should have reported those, it seems, as they have attacked and taken the mine there. There were only 2 survivors, and it was they who were making the report when I arrived. Forsworn are not hard to deal with, despite what the miners here think, and restoring some of the power of the locals here is more than worth my time, especially if it sticks the dagger deeper into the Silverblood family, which I have to imagine this does. As for Kaya, I found him further into the mining settlement, and it wasn't hard to convince him to leave the mine completely and join the Explorers Guild. He's been digging for most of his life, and he's reached the conclusion that digging for ore just isn't important enough. Given that most of the mines feed the Silverbloods, I can see the frustration and feeling of powerlessness. I'm not entirely sure what we'll have him digging for, honestly, but that's more Aryen's concern for the moment. I may be in charge of the guild, technically, but its day-to-day goings-on will be largely his domain, and I leave him to it with gratitude. Besides, until we recruit others, I doubt even Aryen knows exactly what we'll be doing. Regardless, Kaya is on his way to Solitude. My next stop, unfortunately, is in Markarth itself, and a Dwemer tech expert called Madras. It's not Windhelm, but I still hate this city. It didn't take a lot of thinking to locate Madras. A Dwemer expert in Markarth, a city built on a Dwemer ruin, and the home of the most known subject matter expert in Skyrim. It took all of about 10 minutes to walk to the study site of Calcelmo, whom I actively avoided talking to, though I hear that the love story he's part of is still going strong. To find Madras at an enchanting table, studying some small Dwemer artifact. I have to admit, I find his lack of humor, or the humor he thinks he has, to be less than appealing, and the light-emitting goggle he wears to be somewhat off-putting. However, since there is about a 0 chance of pulling Calcelmo away from Nashuan Zel, then I supposed that Madras is the best we will be able to do. If we go digging in Skyrim, it's a fair bet we're going to encounter Dwemer tech, and that means needing a Dwemer expert. He'll do, especially since he agreed to join us. I more or less expected that the excursion into Kolskegger would be a non-event. A bunch of so-called warriors pretending to be miners working in a cave environment they aren't overly familiar with. Simplicity, I thought to myself. On the other hand, I've been burned before by believing my own over-optimistic appraisals. I went in slow and quiet, and it took very little time to clear them out. Sometimes your belief is actually right. While I was there, I also took any free gold bars or ingots I could lay hands on. No sense leaving it just lying around, after all. For quite some time, I have been attempting to locate the last 2 pieces of the Crusaders' armor. For reasons that are somewhat self-evident, I haven't been able to take time to look more into the final locations of the mace and the gauntlets. By sheer chance, however, I had a small conversation with the innkeep of the Silver Blood Inn. Not a friendly man, overall. But while he was refilling my water flasks, we talked of small local legends. Though he did not name the items I sought by name, some of the descriptions were enough for me to put together with the clues I had been left, and both are here in the reach. The gauntlets are likely located in, shockingly, a Nordic tomb, this one called Ragnvold. The mace would seem to be located in a fort that overlooks the east-west road out of the reach. So it was that after clearing out the mine, I turned up and into the mountains. I found Ragnvold in the mid-afternoon, and after destroying the pair of Draugr protectors on the outside, decided that before I would explore, I would sleep. I had almost forgotten that I have this need again. Such is life. Which I suddenly have once again.